71% of Democrats believe that there should be ID to be able to vote. 71% of Democrats. It's in the 90s with Republicans. Overall, it's in the 80s of approval. It is the most popular bill ever in my lifetime. I don't think I've ever seen anything this universally wanted, to happen. And we have this opportunity now because of the Republicans. They have already passed it in the House. It is going to the Senate now. Mike Lee is joining us. He is in the Senate process on the SAVE Act. We are up to 47 Republican co-sponsors. The latest one is Susan Collins, which is shocking. What's next, Mike? What do you need next?
Well, first of all, we've actually got 49 sponsors. Susan Collins has indicated support for it, so we're up to 50, which means we're in a position where we would survive a motion to proceed to this. Motion to proceed to a House-passed message takes place at a simple majority vote. J.D. Vance being available to break the tie, and I'm still hopeful that we'll pick up a small handful of other senators along the way. The next step after that is where it gets interesting. Because we don't have anything close to 60 votes at this point, and although we'd love to pick up that many, we can't be guaranteed that we'll get there in time. I think this is an appropriate place to restore the talking filibuster, to make senators actually speak if they want to filibuster a bill. A filibuster has long been used since the dawn of the Republic, the creation of the U.S. Senate. It's been used as a tool by which senators have procedural rights to theoretically unlimited debate. But throughout time, it's been understood that that requires you to actually speak, because that's what the right is. It's about speaking, about debating through speaking.
This is the Jimmy Stewart, Mr. Smith goes to Washington kind of filibuster.
That's it. That is exactly right. And you keep going until those who are filibustering exhaust themselves, until they are exhausted and they can't go any further. There are some limits on it. You can speak only twice on the same legislative matter on the same legislative day. We can remain in the same legislative day for weeks or even months on end, and that has happened for prolonged periods of time in the past. But over the last few decades, we've sort of lost that part of it, and we have allowed senators to have the benefits of filibustering without actually going to the Senate chamber, standing up, getting recognized, and speaking. And so it's become what I refer to as the zombie filibuster. So you have these two concepts. You've got the zombie filibuster. You just say, nah, I don't like that bill. I'm going to vote against cloture. Cloture is a vote that takes 60. It brings debate to a close by force of will of the Senate. So that's the zombie filibuster. All you have to do is say, I'm not going to support cloture. I will vote against cloture, or you vote against cloture when the time comes. No speaking required. What I believe is that we ought to, for some legislation, including and especially this one, we ought to bring back the talking filibuster. If they want to filibuster, make them speak. We've made it way too easy for them for way too long. It's time to take action, especially on a bill like the Save America Act that's supported by, as you point out, about more than 2 out of 3 Democrats and more than 4 out of 5 Americans on average on the whole. It's not that often you find a bill like this one that is that popular and is still opposed strongly by members of one party in the United States Senate. This is a case not just of Democrats versus Republicans. This is about Washington, D.C. versus everybody else. But the Republicans in Washington are with the people. Democrats are against them.
Why won't the Democrats? I mean, I know that it's complex to do it this way. You have to have, a certain number of Republicans all there all the time to make sure that it, you don't change the legislative day. It just has to keep going. So you need to have a quorum there. And they have to continue to speak. This to me is, Susan Collins said, I'm not for, getting rid of the filibuster. I'm not for getting rid of the filibuster either. I think this gives the filibuster teeth, quite honestly. You make it the way it's supposed to be made.
This is the filibuster.
Let's just
This is what the filibuster is. So we're preserving this
right, I know.
by restoring the talking
right,
filibuster.
I know.
That's what it is.
Correct. I know. So I don't know why they say that this is going to destroy, because I think that's just a lie. But the second thing on this is, why are the Republicans seemingly afraid to make these guys stand up in front of the American people, stop the government for possibly weeks on end, to defend something that even their own party is for? Why wouldn't you see that as a giant win for the Republicans?
Senate Republicans should absolutely see this as a giant win, which it is, undeniably. Look, the American people understand that we need to be fighting, and they'd be happy about this, regardless of the outcome, but especially if we won, which I believe we would. Now, as far as why some might be reluctant, the best argument I can make is I don't think this is a close call. I think this is a no-brainer, not just to try to pass it, but to try to pass it through this mechanism by restoring the talking filibuster. Yes. The best argument I can make as to why somebody might be reluctant is that because this has not been done in decades like this, it's been decades since we've done it like that, people are afraid of what they don't know, what they don't understand. They're afraid of what is unfamiliar. And they're also not certain as to how long it might take, exactly how it might turn out. There is no absolute, a certain victory here, as there never is in any legislative endeavor or any human endeavor for that matter. I believe we would win.
But there's guaranteed defeat. There's guaranteed defeat the other way.
Absolute defeat. Not a doubt in anyone's mind. There is absolute defeat. Now, as to why Democrats don't support this, Democrats in the Senate, as opposed to Democrats among the American people who overwhelmingly support this, I'm always a little reluctant to step into the shoes and peer into the mind of another individual. I don't have that ability. That is typically something that we associate with deity and something that we mortals can't do. But one has to wonder, and I think it is very reasonable to ask, whether the status quo just works for them in a way that really ought to trouble all of us deeply. What if they don't want to discover what's in that box that we want to open? What if they don't want anyone knowing the extent to which this might now be, or might in the future prove to be, a source of votes that they might be able to tap into? What if this flood of illegal immigration that we have between 2021 and 2025, in which 10 or 15 million people came into the country illegally, coupled with the fact that under the NVRA of law passed in 1993 that has subsequently been wrongly but conclusively interpreted by the courts as prohibiting the states from taking any steps to verify citizenship when someone applies for a driver's license and under the NVRA supplied form, checks a box and then signs their name saying, I want to register to vote, and trust me, bro, I am a citizen and am entitled to vote in U.S. elections. What if that's too big of a prize for them to give up? That's what's troubling.
It is.
And that's one of the reasons why I find the Save America Act such a compelling piece of legislation, and why I've been talking about it relentlessly.
So I spoke to the president, I think, last week about this, and I said, we got to do everything again. He's like, I am so on board. We do not win another election without this. And he said, it's got to be cleaned up. It can only be people who are citizens of this country legally that should be able to vote. We have to have this voter ID. He came out on Friday and said he might issue an executive order on voter ID, whether the SAVE Act is passed or not. Have you talked to him about that, and do you support an executive order on this?
Well, I've talked to him about this effort on countless occasions. In earlier conversations, he had wondered aloud whether something might be done on that. I have not talked to him specifically about what that might look like if he were to do it. And I'm not certain the extent to which he might have executive power. If he's got it, great. I'd love to have this problem fixed one way or another. Let me tell you why, even if he does have that power and is able to issue such an order, we still need the Save America Act anyway. Because if he issues that order, he's, thank heaven above, and thank the American people, he's still our president for another 3 years. What happens after that? Mm-hmm. We need this in law. We need this in statute. And it's a lot harder for a subsequent administration to undo a law than it is an executive order. And it's also a lot harder for them to get this thing halted in court if it's a statute that leaves no ambiguity, as opposed to an executive order, which very often is fraught with litigation risks, in part because some executive orders end up having to be based on authorities that are not quite as crystal clear as they need to be.
Right. John Thune is the one that's really going to be making this decision on whether we do this. Where is he, and what is the next step? What can we do, Mike?
Oh, okay, so a few days ago, John Thune joined on to the Save America Act as a co-sponsor. He is supportive of the legislation. I have repeatedly made the case to him personally, privately, and with the rest of the Senate Republican Conference, including last week for about an hour to all my Senate Republican colleagues about the need for the legislation and about how I think we ought to go about it by restoring the talking filibuster and how that would work. He is taking the matter under advisement and is continuing to hear from me and others that we think this needs to happen. So that is not yet decided, but I am guardedly optimistic that we will get to the right place because this is how it has to be done. All we lose, if we try, all we lose is some time. But
that's it.
It's what we've got on our side. We need to have this fight. In the worst case scenario, we try it and somehow we walk away and the thing falls apart. By the way, I think the only way it falls apart is if we don't have wholehearted support, both from our own Senate Republican leadership and from our Senate Republican rank and file membership. It would take strong support and a commitment to work as a team on this. But, we can do hard things. And I believe this would take some time, somewhere between a few days and a few weeks, I think is the magic ticket. But because this hasn't been tried in a while, we're not exactly sure how it would end or how long it would take. But we still have to do it. This is worth the sacrifice.
When does this go? Aren't you guys out of session this week? When does this happen, Mike?
Yes. So
when do you expect this to happen?
Look, my preference was, and I had been making the case to President Trump and to Leader Thune, that the ideal time to do it would be starting a week from tomorrow, Wednesday, the 25th of February. I think it would have been perfect, the day after the State of the Union address. What happened at the end of last week was highly disappointing, where after this prolonged process and these spending bills in which the Democrats had gotten victory after victory after victory, and they had gotten us to maintain these ridiculous spending levels while cutting spending by a modest degree. Small victory in and of itself, but its overall spending levels were still too high. It was still fraught with all kinds of earmarks and Democrat priorities.
Right.
Even after all that, Chuck Schumer and the Democrats said, after all that, we're still not going to vote to pass that spending package unless you remove Homeland Security funding. So they pulled that part out and let that ride separately. Then when we tried to keep that funded last week, rather than saying, okay, you're not going to the Munich Security Conference, Democrats, you're going to stay here until we get this done, we inexplicably recessed for a week. So this put that off. So we're going to have to deal with Department of Homeland Security funding when we get back. I think that was a big mistake. But I hope that as soon as possible, after we figure out how to keep the Department of Homeland Security funded, we can turn to this bill, the Save America Act, and fix this awful vulnerability in our election security by passing it through the enforcement of the talking filibuster.
Mike, thank you very much. Senator Mike Lee from the great state of Utah on the Save America Act. Pay attention to this. This is vital to our nation.
Thank you for thinking for yourself and being part of a movement, because that's really what all of this is. If you want the full story, you want to go deeper, go to blazetv.com/Glenn. Go there right now, sign up, no interruptions, just the truth, uncensored and unfiltered. Don't just watch, take a stand. And I'll see you over there in a minute.